it's Katie again, and I'm back with another video. I think this is going to be the second to last one. I tried to make it the last one, but it was too long. So I'm going to break this up into two. There's a lot of complicated information here, so stay with me, and we'll be almost done with this series. And always, you can go to my blog, rejectpornography.com, and learn all about this book, 10 Reasons to Reject Pornography. 10 common sense reasons to reject pornography. So moving on, in chapter 2, I think it's part 4, a brief history of American ideologies on sexuality. In the Victorian era, 1837 to 1901, the ideology toward sexuality in America was on the completely opposite side of the pendulum than it is today. Although people of this era have been stereotyped as prudish and hypocritical, they also have some well-balanced, common sense ideas about sex and were very concerned about protecting the youth. In Rachel Gernstein's book, The Repeal to Reticence, she compares what she calls the party of reticence to the party of exposure. The main idea for the party of reticence was not about shaming for the sake of condemnation, as Alfred Kinsey and Hugh Hefner would try to have us believe. It was far more tender than that. As one author puts it, get back there. All right. In Letters of James Russell Lowell, 1894, so beautifully described the sentiment. Portions of every man's life are essentially private, and knowledge of them belongs by right only to those intimates who he himself may see fit to trust with his confidence. Gerstein continues his argument by expounding on his writing by saying, Norton's writing underlines a crucial component of reticent sensibility, in that personal affairs, because they can only be made intelligible by the tender understanding of a trusted intimate, must be protected from the unsympathetic gaze of strangers, lest they become slight or ridiculous. Compare this ideology with the cheap portrayal of sex in pornography, and one can see how they are worlds apart. Norton could foresee where exposure could go and tried to avoid it at all costs. Quote, vulgar curiosity is indeed always alert to spy into the sanctities of private life, end quote. That does not sound like a prude. It sounds like a man who knows how to guard his tender heart and the heart of those close to him. The party of exposure, as Gernstein coined the term, were those who began the fight for greater freedom in the area of sexuality. They used literature and the press to make their voices heard, and may have led the way for the so-called sexual revolution of the 60s and the predatory marketing practices of today's media. You can learn more about that in chapter 1. Quote, the sex radicals insisted on speaking plainly not only about sexual morality, hygiene, and contraception, but also about sexual misconduct as well, claiming a higher purity than Puritanism. Advocates of exposure justified their probing by claiming that publicity and openness were best suited to a democracy. They tirelessly evoked the public's right to know and argued that the exposition and depiction of vice have the salutary effect of a warning to evildoers, end quote. As we can see, the party of reticence, with what some viewed as the conspiracy of silence, nor the party of exposure with its tell-all philosophy, had all the answers. However, as we have witnessed in recent current events, both had points to be considered. Some things do not need to be exposed to the public because it takes away the sacredness, the mystery, the magic of pure intimacy. But we can not sweep evil under the rug and act as if it is normal. Current events can attest to that fact. In the case of the Turpin family, there was a conspiracy of silence. This family learned that intimacy meant pain, torture, and bondage, and the parents had covered it up with precision. Although there were warning signs from onlookers, they chose not to get involved with private matters inside a family. On the other hand, the school shooter, Nicholas Cruz, had been exposing himself loudly for quite some time, and no one was doing much about it. The Las Vegas shooter, Stephen Paddock, kept himself isolated with limited social interaction, but was hiding some pretty horrible secrets. In a strange and ironic way, Paddock's conspiracy of silence, having an attraction to child pornography, was also an example of how seeing the truth about everything can be downright evil. Maybe when a person gets this depraved, he no longer has much control over his senses because they have been completely given over to an evil force. It is possible that all the desensitization over the years that caused Is it possible that all the desensitization over the years has caused the human heart to grow cold? The following pages will display the legal history that defines obscenity in America. It is complicated, however, when we peel the layers and look at it through a timeline, it is clear to see how ideologies have changed its meaning and made it somewhat obscure. Maybe through a deeper understanding, America will take a fresh look at obscenity and decide if this is what we really want to release into the next generations. From a legal perspective, the following charts, and I'm talking about these charts, but I'm not going to be sharing them on this video, so you're going to have to go to rejectpornography.com, chapter 2. You're going to see about 5 pages of charts that will define this in more detail. This is just a brief overview of it, but you can get all the information you need there. From a legal perspective, the following charts will offer some insight as to how and why the term obscenity has changed. The progression from the 1800s to the present day clearly shows how judges' interpretations can change languages and lead toward opposite sides of the pendulum. We start our journey by looking at some quotes from the judges involved in the early decisions in the 1800s and contrasting them with more contemporary voices. The first 2 quotes are from Rachel Gernstein's studies from various references. She does not specifically say who the judges in the quotes were, but provides insight as to their philosophies. Quote, "It does not require an expert in art or literature to determine whether a picture is obscene or whether printed words are offensive to decency or good morals." End quote. Another quote, "The case is one that addresses itself to good judgment, common sense, and knowledge of human nature and the weaknesses of human nature." End quote. The following next quotes are direct from latter cases. From Judge Pound in People v. Wendling, 1932. Quote, "One may call a spade without offending decency, although modesty may be shocked. Although the play lacked taste and refinement, the coarse realism was its dramatic effect." End quote. In Roth v. U.S., 1957, Justice Brennan distinguished between sex and obscenity and defined prurient interest as itching, longing, uneasy with desire or longing of persons having itching, morbid, or lascivious longings or desire, curiosity, or propensity, lewd, a shameful or morbid interest in nudity, sex, or excretion." End quote. The most current definition of obscenity comes from Miller v. California, 1973. Quote, "Chief Justice Warren Burger laid out the new 3-part test. The basic guidelines for the trier of fact must be A, whether the average person applying to community contemporary standards would find the work taken as a whole appeals to the prurient interest. Whether the work depicts or describes, this is B, whether the work depicts or describes in a patently offensive way sexual conduct specifically defined as by the applicable state of law. And C, whether the work, taken as a whole, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value." As you can see, the new definition of obscenity leaves a lot of room for confusion and debate. For instance, what does the average person mean? What are community standards? Who is the community? Who decides whether the work, taken as a whole, lacks serious literary, artistic, political, or scientific value? Can the courts take on such a task? Summarizing some of the most important cases from then to now, we can see just how complicated this has become. This is where I'm going to end this, and like I said, if you want to go to those charts and kind of look those over before the next video, that might be a good idea, and I'll talk to you again soon. Thanks for listening.